Hello everybody, and welcome again to Science Live. As you might guess from that first shot, we're going to be discussing the anatomy of dinosaurs and birds today. And I'm joined by Dr. David Menton, and he is one of our staff scientists. Why don't you give the people a little bit of background about how you know so much about these bones?
Well, I'm more of an authority on human bones than I am on bird bones, but I've gotten quite a kick out of looking at birds and dinosaurs. My background basically, I have a PhD in biology from Brown University, spent a couple of years in research at Mayo Clinic, Rochester, Minnesota. And then, if you could imagine, a young kid like me, I was 34 years on the faculty of Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Was in the Department of Anatomy. It was all research and teaching, and I taught some gross anatomy, but primary teaching responsibility was microscopic anatomy, and we won't be doing any microscopic anatomy today.
So today we are going to be using Dr. Menton's vast knowledge of muscles and tissues and bones and how all those things work together to tackle a topic that's a big contentious idea between the evolutionary view of Earth's origins and the biblical view. So as I was coming to work this morning, I came out through the back deck and I passed by all the little dinosaurs sitting on the feeder and came into work. It was a lovely morning. There were a few of little dinosaurs fluttering around the parking lot. I just love getting out and watching those dinosaurs, don't you?
That's what they say. Have you folks heard that? That not only did birds come from dinosaurs, that's been taught for some time, but now they're declaring that they never ceased being dinosaurs, that birds are in fact dinosaurs. They belong to the same clade. So dinosaurs aren't extinct, they're feeding on our bird feeders even as we speak.
So I was just joking. I really don't think that.
I know.
But that is a common idea, and there have been lots of scientific articles and papers and things published trying to promote the idea that birds are dinosaurs. They just didn't really go extinct, they just changed into that over time. They evolved into that over time. So when we think about that idea, we want to evaluate that both biblically and scientifically. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to walk through this presentation and try and understand those things, help everybody understand those things. Okay? Go ahead and teach them what you've got.
Okay, well, you know, the Bible tells us that God created birds on the sixth day of creation. And created birds on the fifth day of creation, and walking creatures that don't fly and what have you on the sixth day, including humans. Dinosaurs would have been a sixth day creation, being terrestrial creatures. Birds would have been likely a fifth day creature. But scientifically, are birds really dinosaurs? Let's learn how to be skeptical about all of this. First of all, what's so special about birds? What's unique about birds that separates them from really any other creature? We can look at my slide up here, and I've listed some things that I believe are unique about birds. First of all, if I had to characterize a bird skeleton, I'd say bone fusion. Now, you know, we have a lot of bones that are fused in our body. We have about 207 bones, but when we were a baby in the womb, we had many more bones than we do here. Today, because bones have fused, and our hips bones have fused. But in birds, as we'll see, this is really very extreme. You've heard birds have hollow bones. That's not really the best word for it, because let's face it, any bone that's lying out in the field, it's been there for a few years from a dead cow, is going to be hollow. So the issue isn't hollow bones, the issue is pneumatic, filled with air in life. And birds, almost all the bones of their body have at least some air in, and this air is all attached or communicates with their respiratory system. Here's another big one for birds, the way they balance on two legs. You know, if you walk on two legs, you have a balance problem. You ever try eating at a table with two legs? It's really quite a handful. You have one hand eating and the other to keep the table steady. If a creature's going to walk on two legs rather than four, it's like going from a four-leg table to a two-leg table. It's all about balance, and the way birds balance is totally different from the way any other creature balances on two legs, including dinosaurs. The way they walk. Nothing walks like a bird. In fact, I'm going to invite you today to try to walk like a bird and see if you can do it. I don't think you will, but we'll give it a try. Another distinction is the anatomy or the structure of their shoulder bones, the way their arms or wings, more accurately, fit on the creature. Absolutely unique in birds, the way that is put together. And then also the hips, the anatomy of the hip bones are very distinctive for birds. And the way they breathe. We're not going to get into that because we're going to talk about bones primarily today. But nothing breathes like a bird. I'll give you an interesting figure on how good bird breathing is. Birds have been hit by aircraft, commercial aircraft, at altitudes of 37,000 feet. Now, I don't think a dinosaur would be able to puff very well at 37,000 feet.
I don't think I would either.
Yeah, it'd be tough. But birds are able to do that because they not only have unusual lungs, they have unusual hemoglobin. Everything about it is just pure bird. Dinosaurs could maybe wish they had these things. I believe birds are the only creatures that have feathers. We're going to look at some dinosaurs with feathers, but we'll see that they really are birds. And finally, there are different creatures that fly. Insects fly, bats fly, but nothing flies the way a bird flies. And of course, do I have to tell you, dinosaurs don't fly at all? Well, let's ask a question that I think is going to really be very important for settling this whole issue. And it has to do with the way birds walk. Here's the question. Do penguins have knees? You ever thought about that? Do penguins have knees? Is this a knee down here someplace? Let me use a brighter light. Is this a knee or is that a knee? And have you seen these rascals walk? They walk pretty stiff-legged, almost as if they didn't have a knee. The answer to that question, do penguins have knees, will take us a long way towards showing birds and dinosaurs are not at all the same. Well, let's give you a little test here. If you can find bird knees. Here's an ostrich. And as you know, an ostrich can really smoke when it gets out and starts running. It'll beat a racehorse, about 43 miles an hour in an ostrich, one of the fastest creatures without getting into the cats. Where is the knee on this creature? Is this perhaps a knee right here? If it is, it's bent the wrong way. Did you notice that? It's bent back. Boy, have I got news for you. That's not the knee. That's the ankle of this bird. You realize what that means? That means this is the foot from here to here. How do you like to buy Reeboks to fit one of those things? Where is the knee? I'll give you a phantom view of where the knee is at. The knee is inside the body. That's why you've never seen bird knees. They're inside the bird's body. You'd have to kill the bird to see its knee. And what's attached to our knee that goes from our knee to our hip? That's our thigh bone, or the femur, we call it. And that dotted line represents where the femur is. Birds are the only creature I know of, the only vertebrates that walk and fly, that have their entire femur inside their body together with their knee. Now, this is going to give you a little help in understanding chicken meat. That's going to be worth the whole trip down here just to understand what you're eating when you eat chicken. From the ankle up to the knee, that would be the drumstick. And boy, that's a real drumstick on an ostrich. And you notice the skin goes all the way around the drumstick. That's because that part is, in fact, outside the bird's body. But what about this piece of meat up here associated with the bird's femur? That's the piece of meat called the thigh. And it's quite a bit of muscle, and the bone in there is the femur. And the thigh is a muscle that will help move the leg, but the thigh itself in the bird doesn't move very much. You're probably wondering, why on earth did a bird have its femur brought from back here, swing forward all the way to here? And there's a one-word answer for that. Balance. If birds' legs went straight down, imagine right from here would be the hip. So you take the bend right here, you straighten it out, the legs go down, the ostrich would be about 5 feet taller, and he'd fall on his nose. But by having the femurs inside the body, that brings a balance point from back here up to here. You already now know things about birds and dinosaurs that a lot of people don't know. Let's take a look at the skeleton inside that ostrich. And here's where you see the bird skeleton is so unusual. The ostrich is a special case because it doesn't fly, so it's missing some of the features. But this bone right here is made up of anywhere from 20 to 25 separate bones all fused together, and it's called the synsacrum. We'll look at it on our model in a bit. Here is the femur inside. Notice it's rather short compared to the tibia here. This is the ankle and this is the foot. Now, see the bones coming back here? These are bones that in our body go to the front. Here are the pubic bones. They go to the front, but on birds, they go to the back, and they're widely separated. This allows an egg to get through there, a large egg, because birds have very large eggs. Well, that gives you an idea what the skeleton looks like. Here's a chicken, and we're going to be looking at a chicken today. And let's just quickly go through a few interesting things about this chicken. Number one, notice the neck. It has lots of vertebrae in it. If you're a mammal, you have 7 vertebrae in your neck. So did I tell you there was going to be a test? Oh yeah, there always has to be a test.
They're getting used to that by now. We're getting lots of quizzes.
By the way, how will we know what a mammal is? If it's got hair, it's a mammal, okay? Mammals have 7 vertebrae in their neck. So here's the test. How many vertebrae does a mouse have in its neck? 7. How many vertebrae does a human being have in their neck? We have hair too, so 7. Now, trick question coming up. Be careful. How many vertebrae does a giraffe have in its neck? I hope you said 7 because the giraffe's a mammal. But birds have a lot of them. We'll talk about why that's important in a bit. Looking at this bird, we see that, look at the hand. Several bones are fused together in the hand, making basically 2 fingers out of that hand. The arm is pretty standard. We have a radius and an ulna and a humerus, pretty much as people do and dogs do and cats do and dinosaurs do. We call that homology. But when we get down here, things start getting interesting. Right here is this synsacrum we were talking about before, all those fused bones that make a very different and unusual pelvis. On the end is a short little tail. Birds today have short tails. We have birds in the fossil record that have long tails, but all of the long-tail birds are built the same way as this bird, this chicken. The first vertebrae are movable. And then the little piece in the end is called the pygostyle. P-Y-G-O-S-T-Y-L-E, pygostyle. That's a little piece of bone and feathers attached to that, if you have feathers that emerge from a bird's tail. Now, in the fossil record, we get birds with long tails, but they're not like dinosaur tails. They just have a long pygostyle to which feathers are attached. Here's the pubic bone, this little thin bone coming back here. How different that is from the big bone going to the front in our body. And down here is a keel. You won't find very many animals with a keel. When you see a keel, that's a place to attach muscle. And we'll see why that's important in a bit. Here's a special bone you find in birds you're all familiar with, the wishbone. That would be comparable to our collarbones up here in our neck. And they're kind of springy. They allow the shoulders to kind of spring together and come apart. This is the shoulder blade of the bird. And notice the ribs partway down have joints. That's an unusual feature of birds. So this is a bony rib, this is a bony rib, but this is a lubricated joint right in the middle here. What muscles attach to this keel? The muscles for flying. Well, we've had a chance to look at the bird. Once again, I remind you that the femur is inside of this chicken. The balance point is not back there at the hip. That would allow the bird to fall on its nose. Instead, the balance point is down there in the knee. Well, this is our chicken we're going to look at today. And so let's look at the real thing. We don't have to look at pictures.
Yeah, let's take a look at here over at the models. So looking at some of the answers, I saw a lot of the kids pointing out that 7, 7, 7. Everybody got the 7 idea, so you're good. We got that clear.
They even got the giraffe right, huh?
Yes, yes.
Well, look at birds. How many vertebrae are in the neck of this bird? Oh my goodness, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'd say 15 anyway. Think of that, 15 vertebrae in the neck. The dinosaur has more vertebrae than we do too. But birds have a particularly long neck, and there's a good reason birds have a long neck. Birds have to get their beak from here to here. That would be like me getting my beak from here all the way back to here.
That would be quite a trick.
Yeah, I've tried it. I get about this far. This is it. Now, why on earth would any bird want to get its beak from here back to here? Well, if you're going to have feathers, you have a big problem. It's called high maintenance. Feathers
Even more than a lady's hair?
Oh my goodness, it's worse than a car, it's worse than anything you can think of. And those feathers have to be maintained. Birds spend about 20-30% of their day maintaining their feathers by preening and getting rid of bugs and insects. And there's a gland right here called the uripygial gland. It's above the bone but under the skin. It has a kind of a nipple on it, and the bird gets its beak, reaches back here, picks up oil, and it grooms that oil into its feathers. What do you figure? Dumb luck on that one? No, I don't think so. I think that's the provident care of the Lord, even being expressed in birds. So the long neck is important for a bird. It allows them to look straight back behind them. Most birds are prey rather than predators, so it's good that they have a flexible neck to look around. Mm-hmm. So what things are similar? Let's start out there between a bird and a dinosaur.
So this is a model of a T-Rex. So this is what we would call a theropod dinosaur. It's the type of dinosaur that the evolutionists say birds evolved from.
Right, if you think about it, birds, dinosaurs walk on 4 legs, like the sauropods. They're not good candidates for bird ancestors. Mm-hmm. Whereas the theropod, and that word theropod, you think of pod in podiatry, that's a foot doctor, a podiatrist, and thero means a beast, so they're called beast foot, these creatures. And it's the ones, as you say, that walked on 2 legs that the evolutionists believe evolved into birds, and that's a good starting point because that's unusual that a creature walks on 2 legs rather than 4. Mm-hmm. So how would you balance if you're a dinosaur? Right from here would be the balance point. From here all the way back to the end of the tail would be the weight on that side of the teeter-totter, okay? And then from here forward is the weight on this side. And that comes out pretty well because if you have lots of muscle in the tail, and think of a dinosaur as having a tail like an alligator, very powerful muscular tail, then you can balance from your hip, as you see here. Here's the hip bone where the leg, the femur, comes up and articulates here. You can balance because of the heavy tail. If we look at these little bars coming out of the tail, those are called dorsal spines. We have ventral, sometimes called hemal arches down here because there's a blood vessel that runs through these spines. And then there are transverse processes on the sides here. And all those little processes that go all the way out to the tip of the tail have muscles and ligaments and tendons attached to them. And that allows that tail to be very powerful and also heavy. You look at the bird's tail, it's very, very short. It has a tail, and it has these transverse processes, and you can see dorsal spines here. Not too much for ventral processes, but there are little processes, which means this part of the bird's tail would move, just like the dinosaur's tail could move. But the rest of the tail is just this little piece of bone called a pygostyle that feathers attach to. So if a bird had a long tail, like some of the ones in the fossil record do, Archaeopteryx for example, it would be like this stick. The tail would be stiff because the vertebrae would be all attached to one another. The part that moved would be the base. So the tail would wiggle like this.
So it would look more like a peacock's tail, even though the peacock doesn't have that long pygostyle in it. It would look more like a peacock's tail moving. It can only really move up and down and side to side.
A lot of the birds that have that long pygostyle, you'll see the feathers are like a fern. They go out on both sides, all along the whole length, with no muscle in this part of the tail. So very lightweight. That's why birds, if they're going to balance, they can't balance from the hip the way a dinosaur does. They have to balance from their knee and walk from their knee on down.
Because they don't have all the mass associated with the tail in the back to counterbalance that.
That's right. You know, how would you kids like to walk like a bird? Would you like to try it out?
Let's try it out. This is going to be fun. Kid, get off the
Okay.
couch.
Off the couch.
Move out into an open space.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm not going to really demonstrate very much with this because we'd need a winch to get me up. But if you're going to walk like a bird, first of all, you have to walk on your toes, which, by the way, the dinosaur walks on his toes, too. In fact, this dinosaur, T-Rex, walks on 3 toes, so does this chicken. So that's another similarity. So you get up on your toes, see how high the heels are off the floor? And now here's the hard part. You have to bend down until your knees touch your chest. Well, I can get about, what do you figure, a third of the way?
And then try to walk across the living room like
Right.
that.
And then to make sure your knees didn't leave, we'd maybe tie a rope around your thigh and around your body. So your body would be parallel with the floor. You'd be walking from the knee on down on your tiptoes. Now, if any of you have tried that, you'll probably need help getting picked up off the floor right now. But a bird, because God designed it that way, can run quite fast. As I mentioned, the ostrich can go about 43 miles an hour. That would beat, I think, all the racehorses out on the track.
And definitely a person. Okay, we've got a question here, and I think this will get to one of the other differences that you want to talk about. Now, we believe that from the fossil record, dinosaurs laid eggs. And we know that birds lay eggs because I've eaten their eggs before. In fact, there were some on my kitchen counter this morning. So Alexandra, who's 8, she asked the question, how do chickens lay eggs? And I think that'll play right into part of your instruction here.
Another similarity between dinosaurs and birds is they are amniotes. That means they lay eggs, or they have eggs. Now, we humans are amniotes too, and you think, do we have eggs that we come from? We do. The eggs just don't get outside of mother's body. They stay inside and develop there. But they have yolk and everything, just like a chicken egg might. Birds lay an unusual egg in that it's so big compared to the size of a bird. How big is the egg from a full-size, say, 3 or 4 ton T-Rex? It's about the size of a football. In the case of a bird laying an egg of that relative size, it would be like a bird laying a BB. There would be no challenge to that. But if you're going to lay an egg that's nearly the size of this bottle out of this bird, you better have an open pathway. Now, you want to see that open pathway? Take a look from the back here. Notice the pubic bones, because they're so wide, and this whole structure in the pelvis is opened up to allow that big egg to come out.
So this gap that we can see right in here is where the egg would exit. And these bones are slightly flexible too, because they're very thin.
Right. And the whole abdominal area, notice, is free for that egg. Take a look at a dinosaur by comparison. Imagine if a T-Rex laid an egg that was the size of a Volkswagen. Okay. By the way, that wouldn't work because the egg would just collapse under its own weight if it were that big. And the bird would never be able to get out of it because the shell would have to be so thick to keep it from collapsing. So dinosaurs lay eggs the size of footballs. But do you see everything in the way? This big skid, that's the pubic bones. Instead of being 2 little filaments that come to the back, we have a big massive structure, a pair of them coming together. And this skid, what on earth did they use that for? I believe when the dinosaur crouched down to rest, they put their weight. That's the only explanation I can give as an anatomist for having pubic bones this massive.
So this cavity that we can see down the middle right here is where the egg would have to pass through to get out. And you can see how tight that gap is compared to how open it is.
Look at here, the ischial bones are in the way.
Yeah,
they're
these
coming to
bones
the
coming
back.
here. So all of these things are getting in the way of laying a big egg comparatively when we think about the bird skeleton.
So we have dinosaur eggs here, real ones, fossil eggs at the Creation Museum. And the biggest eggs we have are about the size of a football, or kind of oblong. But think how small that is relative to the size of the dinosaur. So big similarities are the 2 walk on 2 legs. They both walk on their toes, but that's not a big deal. Your cat and your dog walks on their toes, not on their whole flat feet the way humans do.
And so do cows and horses.
So do cows and horses.
And ungulates, yep.
So these similarities, in my view, are not terribly significant. The differences are huge. And the differences are a completely different pelvis. This pelvis is more like our pelvis. I mean, let's look at a human pelvis. We had one out
Got
here.
one right over here.
This is the pubic bone here, the pubic ramus, and this is the ischium. And they go straight down. They don't go to the back as it does on the bird. They're more like what we see here, except on the dinosaur. These pubic bones are much longer and more massive, and they're not attached to the ischial bone. They're separated like that. This is sometimes referred to as a lizard-hipped dinosaur. Now, here's the interesting part. There are bird-hipped dinosaurs.
Well, wait a minute. If there were bird-hipped dinosaurs, shouldn't the birds have evolved from bird-hipped dinosaurs?
That's what you think.
That's what you think.
That's what you think. That's not the case. You can recognize a bird hip from a lizard hip that fast. If it walks on four legs, chances are it's a bird hip.
Probably, yeah.
And four legs just doesn't work for turning it into a bird, right? You need the two legs. So the evolutionists go to the theropod dinosaurs to get the two legs, and in the process they end up with a dinosaur that's got a lizard hip, not a bird hip. Oh, it's a tough life for an evolutionist. There's problems all the time.
All right. Now, I know you could go on and on about this for days, and this afternoon you're actually going to be giving the talk from Legacy Hall Live. He's going to be doing his talk where he talks about all kinds of these things. So some of the other key things that you'll draw out are the difference in feathers, the difference in the respiratory system, all those things that we don't have time to get into today. You're going to look at some fossilized examples. So we had a couple questions about that. The herb kids asked, haven't they found fossilized birds inside dinosaurs? And the answer is yes. So that would be another indicator. So all of those things are going to be explained in a lot more detail today. And we're going to keep thinking about these things and challenging the evolutionists from that perspective. How do you see these things pointing you to God and His glory?
Each creature is made so perfectly for the way it lives and what it does. If you're going to live like a dinosaur, you couldn't be better built than this. And if you're going to be a bird, particularly a flying bird, and by the way, some birds fly in water rather than air. It takes the same kind of muscles. And such an optimized bird. A famous ornithologist, Pettingill, once said of birds, they are formed to fly. Everything about their body is just optimized. For example, to keep the weight down, how about this little trick? Birds have one ovary rather than two. Hey, it keeps the weight down a bit. Birds usually, at least the ones today, don't have teeth. That keeps the weight down in the skull. There are some birds that have what look like teeth, but it's really just little spikes on the beak. By the way, one of those birds that has the nastiest looking teeth you've ever seen is a hummingbird.
Yes.
And that's probably not for chewing nectar, wouldn't you think?
Probably not. I don't think they're using it for
maybe
that.
insects. So just the optimization. 40% of this bird's body is tied up in the muscles to fly with, 20 to 40% depending on the bird. And those muscles attach to this keel and come up to the wings, and they can only pull the wings down. They can't push them up.
Because muscles can only pull.
You
Like we
can
talked
only
about the other day.
pull.
The only thing a muscle can do is contract.
And yet this muscle that you eat when you eat the breast meat of a chicken has two layers to it if you look at it carefully, an outer layer and an inner layer. The outer layer is the pectoralis muscle, just like we have in our body. The pectoralis major. I could rip off my shirt.
Well, let's not do
yeah,
that.
we get embarrassing. That muscle pulls the wings down, okay? How are you going to get the wings up with equal force, because birds get engaged in flapping flight up and down? Well, that's so neat I should charge you $5 a piece just to explain this to you. The inner layer of muscle attached to the keel is attached to a line like you use to pull up a flag or a sail on a boat. And that line comes up through the shoulder and then down to the top of the humerus. So when that muscle contracts down, it pulls the wing up. When the pectoralis pulls, it brings it down. So the one that raises it's called the supracoracoideus muscle. The one that pulls the wing down is the pectoralis muscle. No other creature has a supracoracoideus muscle. Dinosaurs don't have it. And that requires special bony struts so that you don't pull the shoulders out of shape. And only birds have these special struts. They're called coracoids.
Yeah. All right, so all of these things are just amazing, amazing design features that we can distinguish clearly from Birds and Dinosaurs. And I encourage you guys to check out the talk later this afternoon. We'll also be featuring talks again at 3 and 7, and that'll be our regular schedule all through the week. And if you don't get a chance to watch it today or catch it later, or you want to share this with friends and family, this video, Formed to Fly, is the video that Dr. Menton explains all of these things. So you can purchase this as a DVD or a download, share this with friends and family, especially those who might be skeptical of the biblical account of creation. And in it, as he always does, Dr. Menton's passion, just like mine, is not just to teach about science, but to connect these things to gospel truths as well. All right, we thank you for all you for joining us today, and we will be back with you again on Monday. We're going to have a special announcement on Monday about the future of the program, so stay tuned for that. And until then, we hope you get out and explore and enjoy God's beautiful creation.